In November of 1999, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, or if you lived in Europe or Australia, Spyro 2 Gateway to Glimmer, was released on the Sony PlayStation to critical acclaim and success. For those unfamiliar with the franchise, Spyro 2 is an explorative platformer with several collectibles needed for game completion. The first and most recognizable of these collectibles are the gems. There are 5 varieties of gems with distinct values. There are the red gems with a value of 1, the green gems with a value of 2, purple with a value of 5, yellow with a value of 10, and finally pink with a value of 25. The total value of all the gems in the game sum to 10,000. The second main collectible are the orbs, and there are 64 of them in total. Most of the orbs in the game are given to you by NPCs for completing challenges for them, but some are found just by completing some difficult platforming or finding a secret area. And thirdly, there are the 14 talismans. These trinkets are awarded to you by an NPC at the exit location in the 6 main levels in the first area of the game, and the 8 main levels in the second area of the game. The 4 main levels in the third and final area of the game do not have talismans. Instead, you are awarded an orb for talking to the NPC at the exit to the level. These 3 main collectibles are needed in order to access certain portions of the game. Gems function as the game's currency and are needed to be paid to a character aptly named Moneybags.
Very well then. The password to open the tomb is... Are you ready? Gullible!
Moneybags, the greedy scumbag that he is, will charge exorbitant prices in order for Spyro to get past an obstacle, learn a new ability, or even access some necessary levels for game completion. Orbs are purely collectible and are needed in high enough quantities to open a select few levels and doorways. Talismans are also needed in order to open the doors to fight the first 2 bosses and access the second and third main areas of the game. By my calculations, the developers intended for the player to collect at least 3,800 gems, 40 orbs, and all 14 talismans in order to face the final boss, Ripto. But how many of these are actually needed to beat the game, and how fast can it be done? This is the world record progression for Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. The first speedrun of the game was uploaded to YouTube on November 15th, 2008 by Laponye36. The run clocked in with a final time of 50 minutes and 57 seconds. Laponye used 2 major glitches in this run in order to complete it this quickly. The first of these is the double jump. The double jump is very simple to perform. Just jump and then charge while Spyro is travelling upwards or at the top of the jump. You just can't be pressing any directional buttons. With this trick, hundreds of places meant to be just outside of reach for Spyro now become very within reach. The trick was first showcased before the game even came out. In this demo, you can see Spyro perform a very suboptimal double jump. The second major trick is used only once. This is swim in air. You see, water doesn't exist as a 3-dimensional object in this game. All that exists is the water plane. All the intended underwater areas can normally only be accessed by charging or head bashing through this plane, and when you are below the plane, you are encased by the local terrain. Swim in air circumvents this by charging or head bashing through the water plane, but ending up in an area not enclosed by the terrain. In Winter Tundra, Laponye uses the double jump to get out of bounds and then head bashes through the water plane, allowing him to swim under a door, which normally requires 40 orbs in order to fight Ripto. I'm not going to dwell on this run for very long. It features a lot of suboptimal movement, bonking on objects and the terrain, as well as some very questionable routing choices. Throughout the entire run, Lapognier pays Moneybags 3,000 gems, 500 to learn to swim underwater, 100 to use the submarine in Aquaria Towers, 400 to activate the Zephyr portal, 500 to learn how to climb, 100 gems to play Icy Speedway, 400 gems to access Shady Oasis, and 1,000 gems to learn Head Bash. However, with the power of the double jump, he was able to skip paying Moneybags 100 gems in Glimmer, 400 gems to access Aquaria Towers, 200 gems to use the bridge in Crystal Glacier, and 200 gems to use the elevator in Magma Cone. Curiously, Lapognier also collected 3 orbs early in the run to play Ocean Speedway, and as I said before, he also paid Moneybags 100 gems to play Icy Speedway. Both of these levels are optional as they do not have talismans, but they do offer 400 gems each, which can be collected very quickly. Because of the 3 orbs he collected, this became known as the 3 orb route. Just 3 months later, Lapognier cut his time down to 47 minutes and 51 seconds. He had a new route which didn't collect any orbs, but he still paid 100 gems to play the optional Icy Speedway, and he also paid 200 gems to play the optional Canyon Speedway. He had improved his movement around the game, and he was also armed with a new major trick, Climb Skip. Climb Skip is a series of double jumps that can be performed in order to skip buy and climb from Moneybags. The only really tricky jump is the very first one, from the wall on Autumn Plains up to this arch. You need to execute a very good double jump, as well as be lined up with a good distance and angle. Finally, you also need to get a good flop, which is done by coming out of the charge animation at the correct time. Lapognier did know about this trick in his last run, but didn't go for it due to its difficulty. In this run, however, he did go for it, and spent 3 minutes falling over and over until he got it. In Winter Tundra, he also lost over a minute on Swim in Air. The first try ended up with him falling before going out of bounds, and the second try ended with him head bashing too high. At the time, the 3 orb route was thought to be faster than the 0 orb route, and the next world record seemed to strengthen this argument. On December 21st, 2009, Ratchet 5 would come along and beat Lapognier with a time of 44 minutes and 12 seconds. Ratchet used a modified 3 orb route along with Climb Skip to great effect. Ratchet only fell once during Climb Skip, a huge improvement over Lapognier. He had also come up with more efficient gem routes and utilized more shortcuts. Just to show off a few, he doesn't free the ice builders on the first island of Crystal Glacier, instead using a double jump to reach the mainland. Ratchet would also perform this glide in Breeze Harbor, which skips 95% of the level. In Sunny Beach, instead of persuading the turtle to stand on the button to open the gate, Ratchet cleverly hops onto the turtle and then double jumps onto and over the gate. There were still some major areas which could be improved in his run though. He ended up head bashing too low on the Swim in Air, falling to his death, and also another death due to a poor double jump in Scorch. There were also some tricks Ratchet knew of that saved small amounts of time, such as this one he briefly mentions in Colossus.
You can actually skip this guy here, but it's kind of hard to do, and it probably is more effort than it's worth anyway, because it only takes about 2 seconds to talk to that guy.
And this one in Crystal Glacier.
I got a pretty lucky run, for these things. You can skip them entirely, but it just takes a while, and I actually didn't know about it before I watched Lapognier 36's No Flame Challenge. Go watch it, it's really awesome.
Ultimately, he decided against them because the time save wasn't worth the difficulty of the skip. As you can probably guess, creating a good speedrun route for this game is a lot more complicated than just finding the fastest route from A to B. It isn't like Super Mario Bros, where you generally want to travel from left to right as fast as possible. You need to factor in which gems are the most valuable in terms of both the time to obtain and their intrinsic value. You also have quite a bit of freedom with which order to play the levels. Another issue is that introducing a big skip may not save as much time as originally thought. Take Breeze Harbor for example. Sure, you can skip right from the beginning to the end, and this might save a lot of time, but you miss out on all the gems there are along the intended path. This means you may have to go even further out of your way to make up for those lost gems you didn't collect. After all, Ratchet still ended up paying 2,500 gems to Moneybags, and was playing 2 optional levels. That was all about to change though, and Ratchet's run was the last time an orb was collected or an optional level was played in a world record speedrun for Spyro 2. In early February of 2010, in the midst of creating a TAS, Lapogne36 would find a new method to get swim in air. Lapogne had found that if you perform a charge at a very precise angle to the river, you can just barely make contact with the water plane without going inbounds or bumping on the terrain. Combine that with this method to get into the courtyard of the Winter Tundra Castle, and all of a sudden, 1,000 gems don't need to be collected for the head bash power-up. This would have a snowball effect. Speedrunners would no longer have to play 2 optional speedway levels for the extra gems, one of which also costed 100 gems to play. The potential for a huge world record was there. On November 26, 2011, almost 2 years after Ratchet's run, a new player, Neviutz, broke out onto the scene with a time of 42 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm not going to talk about this run at all, because a week later, he demolished it, with a time of 37 minutes and 10 seconds. Lapogne's TAS had completely revamped how Spyro 2 was run, and the game now only required 1,400 gems and 14 talismans. Neviutz had studied the TAS thoroughly, and where possible, would try to follow it as best he could. Let's take a look. We begin the first level of the game, Glimmer, and Nev immediately starts picking up gems and quickly double jumps out of bounds and back inbounds into the cave. After picking up some more gems and skipping Moneybags, he heads straight to the end of the level. Exiting the Glimmer portal into Summer Forest, he charges almost directly to Idle Springs, and hesitates just for a moment so he can pick up a green gem before entering. Idle Springs is a level with 5 locked doors, and the only way to open those doors is to kill the enemies that are holding the NPCs who can open them. Nev would kill the enemy and then quickly pick up some gems while waiting for the door to be opened. After collecting the talisman, he would stay in the level a little longer, picking up some more high value gems before exiting back to Summer Forest. Nev then took a slight detour to grab a high value pink gem and then would beeline it for Colossus, smashing a couple more baskets along the way. After beginning Colossus along the intended path, he quickly leaves it and basically takes the shortest possible path to the talisman. After grabbing the talisman, he heads to the ice cave and the ice rinks at the back of the level, where the most valuable gems are. The moment he hits 500 gems, he exits. Back in Summer Forest, Nev pays 500 to swim underwater and heads towards Hurricos and Sunny Beach, picking up gems along the way. Immediately in Hurricos, he double jumps up to a ledge and grabs some high value gems as he waits for a good cycle on the barriers. He then gets on top of the talisman building and performs a small out of bounds to get into the building to collect the talisman. Just before exiting, he grabs 15 more gems. Sunny Beach is another long level where you must persuade some turtles to stand on buttons so they can open doors. Nev skips the first door just as we've seen in a previous run. He also skips the second and third doors by getting on top of this crate. He also manages to grab some valuable gems with this detour. He then flames the final turtle towards the button to open the door to the talisman room. After Sunny Beach, he heads straight towards Aquaria Towers as fast as possible, picking up some more gems on the way of course. In Aquaria Towers, the end of the level is directly behind and above the start of the level. However, even if you perform a series of double jumps to get up there, the final NPC won't give you the talisman unless you are swimming underwater. In order to reach the end while swimming, all the red buttons throughout the level need to be pressed, slowly filling the level with water. Nev basically just plays this level, taking the intended path, and pays 100 gems to Moneybags so he can get past the instant kills sharks. With all 6 talismans from Summer Forest collected, he is warped to the first boss, Crush. Nev makes quick work of Crush, taking damage to speed up the cycles and also keeping him on a single button, so there is little time where Crush is walking around. The first level in Autumn Plains he plays is Crystal Glacier, where he uses the same strategies as Ratchet's run. He skips to the mainland with the same glide and also doesn't skip the second ice builder section. However, instead of freeing the ice builders in the final section, he is able to skip that by getting on top of the talisman building and simply passing through the roof. This is only possible because the developers never programmed for there to be collisions with Spyro in areas he was never supposed to be. The next level is Skelos Badlands, where Nev quickly double jumps up to an area that connects the beginning and the end of the level. He grabs some worthwhile gems, grabs the talisman, and then collects a few more gems before exiting. Breeze Harbor is up next, and once again, Nev basically uses the exact same strategies as Ratchet. He collects the talisman and a few more gems before using the exit portal. Back in Autumn Plains, he heads away from the castle towards the Zephyr portal. Nev is about 100 gems shy of paying for Zephyr, but this is all part of the route. He double jumps onto the wall and then proceeds to nail Climb Skip first try, and makes his way into Scorch. Nev collects some 5 gems along the way to the flagpole, and then double jumps up to the area which has a huge concentration of gems, where he spends some time collecting them. He then makes his way into the final area of the level, grabs a few more gems, and then the talisman. The next level is Fracture Hills. The end portal location is on an island in the center of the level. It can be double jumped and clipped into, but the area inside is deloaded, and the NPC inside can't be interacted with. To gain access to the room in the center, Nev travels around the outskirts of the level, freeing each of the 6 satyrs one by one. Due to the long nature of the level, this is an opportune time to grab as many gems along the way. Magma Cone was next, and Nev quickly made his way to the edge of the map on the left hand side. He made his way towards the building where Moneybags is and double jumped all the way to the top. He then glided from there to the top of the volcano to close the lid and collect the talisman. Back in Autumn Plains, Nev then pays Moneybags 400 gems so he can access the level Shady Oasis. This was another long level and the closest thing to an auto-scroller this game has. There are 5 gates blocking your path, and while a few can be circumvented, you cannot collect the talisman at the end because Shorty the hippo, who gives you the talisman, must be escorted from the start of the level. You must knock down fruit from 5 trees near each gate, and Shorty will eat the fruit, turn giant, and break down the gates for you. This was another excellent time for Nev to grab as many gems as possible before collecting the talisman. As Nev is almost as far away as possible from Zephyr and 90 gems short, he makes his way to the top of the tallest tower and performs the longest glide to an island where there is 75 gems. Conveniently, this island is also right next to the Zephyr portal. Previous runs had played Shady Oasis last because it was the farthest from the starting location in Autumn Plains, and there was still a need to buy Head Bash in Winter Tundra. This new route factored in playing Shady Oasis second to last, so its gems can have use paying for the Zephyr portal. With no more gems needing to be collected, Nev makes his way through Zephyr as fast as possible, and taking the intended path for the most part. After collecting the final talisman in Autumn Plains, he is warped to the second boss, Gulp. I haven't said much about the bosses in Spyro 2 so far, only just talking briefly about the first boss, Crush, a little earlier. Gulp, on the other hand, is a completely different beast. Unlike Crush, who is essentially the same fight every time, Gulp is the first point of RNG in the run. To break it down, Gulp has a total of 10 hit points, and for the first 3 hit points, you'll be given barrels, bombs, and rockets respectively. On the final 7 hit points, the weapons you get are random. So how do you get the weapons? Well, every now and then, pterodactyls will fly in and drop some eggs in random locations in the arena. The pterodactyls will hold onto the eggs for a random amount of time before dropping them, and the hatch time for the eggs is also random, and both of these variables fluctuate by a few seconds each. If that wasn't enough, whenever Gulp gets hit with a weapon, he will bounce up and destroy all the remaining weapons on the field. This means you will have to wait for more pterodactyls to fly in and drop more eggs. It would seem you need to wait for at least 10 drop cycles. However, as you might have just seen, it is possible to get 2 hits in a single cycle. Neviutz shot a rocket at Gulp, and before Gulp could bounce up and destroy the other rocket, Nev picked it up and used it. This wasn't a new strategy for Gulp, as it was used in Lapogne's and Ratchet's runs. The rocket-rocket combination is the easiest to get a double hit with, and you can always guarantee it since there is a guaranteed rockets phase. The rocket barrel combination is the second easiest, and Nev manages to score another double hit with it midway through the fight. It's possible to get a double hit with any weapon combination except for when there are only bombs on the field, and in most cases, the weapons need to be placed in good enough positions to score a double hit. Overall, Nev managed to complete the fight with 8 drop cycles. Nothing special, but for the time, this was more than good enough. Nev was now on the home stretch of the game. His first attempt at swim in air ended with him charging a little too early and missing the water plane. He tried again 50 seconds later and nailed it. Now all that stood in his way was Ripto. Ripto is the second point of RNG in the run, and the fight has 3 phases. Similar to the Gulp fight, weapons will be dropped from the sky in random positions and at random times. Once you pick up 3 of them, you'll be awarded a power-up for 5 seconds and can deal some damage. The power-up you get will depend on the colour of the third weapon. Green is the best power-up, followed by red, and then blue. Nev managed to take care of Phase 1 in 4 power-up cycles, and Phase 2 was handled in 5 power-up cycles. Most of the power-ups he got were the middling red one. In Phase 3, you are armed with a permanent fly and permanent fireball power-up, and RNG is no longer a factor. Nev just blasts Ripto as fast as possible to complete the run. This 37-minute time wouldn't stand for very long though, because on January 27th, 2012, Neviutz would cut the world record time again, down to 34 minutes and 13 seconds. This 3-minute time save didn't come through any revolutionary trick or routing change, just sheer increase of skill at the game. He didn't slip and fall on jumps nearly as much, and he didn't take so much time getting Spyro into the correct position before performing a tricky jump. On the screen now is a side-by-side comparison of the first level Glimmer. Even though the movement is basically the same, by the end of the level, he is 3 seconds ahead. As for the boss fights, this time he managed to get 3 double hits on Gulp, beating him in 7 cycles instead of 8. Typically, 1 less cycle saves about 15 seconds, but one of the eggs during the rockets phase despawned, and he had to wait for more eggs to drop to score a double hit. Overall, the fight was only 5 seconds faster in the new world record. He also managed to get swim in air on his first attempt, which saved another huge chunk of time, and the final fight with Ripto was a lot cleaner, and Nev managed to save a whopping 50 seconds on the final boss alone. While doing research for this video, I came across another video from Neviutz. The video was dated back to December 2nd, 2011, and was titled Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage to Autumn Plains in 3:47. I think it's time we talk about a new trick. Crush Skip. Remember how I said before that the reason to get the talismans from the main levels in the first 2 areas of the game was to open the door to the bosses? Well, by performing this out of bounds in Summer Forest, you can glide into the tunnels beneath the castle. From there, you can make your way into the area with the Hurricane and Sunny Beach portals and line yourself up just underneath this gate. From this position, Spyro's flame can barely reach a button which is off screen and lower the gate. With Spyro now inside of the gate, the archway in which the gate moves up and down in has no collision. You can then jump through the side of the archway and fly into the pit behind the 6 talisman door, triggering the boss fight. The earliest publishment I could find of this trick was from April 24th, 2007 by YouTube user Shadow Wizard. However, in the 4.5 years of history we've covered, it's never been used in a speedrun. Why was that? Well, while speedrunners did know about this trick, it was ultimately deemed as useless. In Autumn Plains, Elora checks if you have all 14 talismans in the game before opening the door and letting you fight Gulp, not just the 8 talismans from Autumn Plains. If only there was a way to skip into Gulp as well. The developers for the game put a great deal of thought into the design of Autumn Plains. Many of the out of bounds we've previously seen are due to Spyro double jumping up to an area thought to be unreachable, and so the developers didn't bother programming collision with Spyro in those areas. However, reaching the maximum height in Autumn Plains is intended, and because of this, the developers had made sure to program collision absolutely everywhere, so nothing could be skipped into.
Oh my fucking god. Look at that. That is fucking amazing. But I wouldn't consider it a really a chitch into Gulp, but it's so fucking close to chitching into Gulp. It is just really, really fucking close.
Speedrunner Crash41596 had seen an old video on YouTube and decided to bring it to the forefront of the Spyro 2 speedrunning scene. This was the first demonstrable proof that an out of bounds on Autumn Plains was possible. However, there was a couple of issues with it. Firstly, as Spyro is coming out of the vortex from Summer Forest, you don't have any control over him until he lands, which means you can't steer him towards the trigger for Gulp. And secondly, you still need all 14 talismans for this glitch to happen. Basically, you need to collect all 8 talismans in Autumn Plains, then go back to Summer Forest and collect the remaining 5 talismans there. This was possible due to Crush Skip. From Summer Forest, travel back to Autumn Plains using the vortex in front of Crush, and the moment the game detects you're in Autumn Plains and have 14 talismans, it warps you to just below the floor in front of the Gulp door. Even if you could use this glitch to get into Gulp, it would be slower due to all the backtracking. It would seem that cutting out even a single talisman from the run was impossible. Over the next couple of months, racing Spyro 2 would become popular on the website Speedruns Live. It was here that all the top runners would hone their skills, invent new routes, and put them to the test to see who was the fastest of them all. The timing of Speedruns Live races is slightly different than to the normal timing method. In general, the SRL time is between 18 and 28 seconds longer than the actual runtime. The top players at the time were Cypress, Jambalia, Neviutz, Crash41596, Spudleyman, Buff Seagull, and Solar Bowler. These 7 runners would most consistently finish in the top 3 of races, and thus would have the best chance of beating Neviutz's world record. But from the first 14 any% races that had taken place on Speedruns Live, half of them were won by one person, Crash. On March 27th, 2012, on the 15th any% race, Crash would finally beat Neviutz's time by 15 seconds. Just 4 days later, he smashed the world record again by almost a minute, cutting it down to 32 minutes and 59 seconds. Unfortunately, I can't show you any footage from these world records, as they seem to have been lost to time. Not even 2 weeks later, Solar Bowler would finish a race with a world record time of 32 minutes and 40 seconds. Unfortunately, no video exists of this record either. Solar Bowler's unexpected world record would only last 2 months, as Crash would go on a tear in Spyro 2 any%. He managed to get a low 32-minute time, and this time it was highlighted on Twitch, only for it not to exist anymore. On July 17th, Crash would finish over 10 minutes ahead of his competitors, Buff Seagull, and a new runner on the scene, Saboom. The final time was 31 minutes and 6 seconds. 4 days later, Crash beat it again in a head-to-head race against Saboom. Saboom managed to finish the race with a very respectable time of 32 minutes and 29 seconds, but Crash was just on another level, finishing with a new world record time of 30 minutes and 47 seconds. Unfortunately, this is the Speedruns Live Dark Age, and no videos of these records exist. There was only one question. What had happened to Neviutz? One of the top runners at the time had simply vanished from history. The answer was quite simple. He couldn't keep up with his new rivals. His hardware didn't allow it. You see, Neviutz was playing Spyro 2 using his PlayStation 3. Even though it was a more modern console, the load times were extremely slow. Here is a comparison between the difference in time to exit Glimmer and enter Summer Forest. It isn't even close. On top of that, there would be sections of the run that would experience some lag, which would also cost him some more time. Over the course of a whole run, Neviutz would lose 2 or more minutes to his competition. Crash's success hadn't come solely from his console advantage. He had also studied Laponnier's tool-assisted speedrun, and instead of accepting it as the optimal route, he improved upon it. In particular, he found much better routes for gems and had also decided that going to the top of Autumn Plains, gliding to the island for 75 gems, and playing Zephyr last was a big waste of time. Crash was also incorporating some more difficult double jumps and glides into his runs. Just to show off a few, he skips the first door in Colossus that was hinted all the way back in Ratchet's run. He gets to the mainland sooner in Crystal Glacier by not going for the slightly easier Bone Seesaw glide, and also doing the other tricky jump hinted in Ratchet's run to skip the second Ice Builder section. instead of lighting the fires on the boat in Breeze Harbour, he would perform a deceptively tricky double jump to get on top of the boat and to the talisman platform. This glide in Zephyr to skip the first half of the level, and he would also take a faster route towards Climb Skip by performing 2 glides along the side of the castle and a third tricky glide to get on top of the Breeze Harbour portal. On August 9th, 2012, Crash would set a world record time of 29 minutes and 22 seconds, the first ever sub 30 minute run of Spyro 2, and with a video to accompany it. The execution all around was stellar. Little time was wasted lining Spyro up for jumps, and only very minor mistakes are peppered throughout the run. The Gulp fight started off slow due to an egg despawn, but after that, it was double hit, after double hit, after double hit, and he managed to defeat Gulp in only 6 drop cycles. The only weak point in the run was Crash's Ripto fight, and it wasn't even really that bad. Ripto didn't steal a single weapon the entire fight, and Phase 1 was dealt with in 3 power-up cycles, and Phase 2 was in 4 power-up cycles, with Crash barely clutching out the last hit of Phase 2 with maybe only a frame or 2 to spare. Crash's run showed a new level of optimization within the category. More and more difficult jumps and glides had been incorporated, and with 2 big sources of RNG at the end of the run, world record paces would surely be harder to come by. Only a week later, Crash would be in a Skype call and have another friendly race with Saboom. The result of the race didn't lead to any new world records. In fact, nothing really interesting happened at all. That is, until after the race. After defeating Ripto and letting the credits roll, Saboom was sent to Dragon Shores, a bonus area of the game which features a theme park. However, like all theme parks, there is a steep entry fee. The player needs to have collected 55 orbs and 8,000 gems. With far fewer than the required orbs and gems, Saboom was just messing around in the beach area outside of the theme park when he managed to accidentally double jump and flop over the wall, ending up out of bounds. By swimming around the outside of Dragon Shores, you can then glide back in, bypassing the orb and gem requirements. Inside of Dragon Shores, there are a variety of minigames you can play, and a theatre where you can rewatch all of the cutscenes that played throughout the game. However, behind another locked door in Dragon Shores is something really special, a permanent fireball power-up. This locked door requires you to have all 64 orbs and all 10,000 gems to open. Essentially, you need 100% game completion. With the new Dragon Shores out of bounds, Crash then hypothesized you could glide from the out of bounds area and collect the permanent power-up, and lo and behold, it was possible. Just barely. Was this all completely useless though? I mean, you need to defeat Ripto before you can access Dragon Shores, right? Nope! The game designers had politely left every single portal in the game active, even the ones that are supposed to be inactive. You see, the trigger for the game to start loading Spyro into the new level is typically within the archway you see Spyro charge into. However, when the designers want the level to be inaccessible, the load trigger was still active, only hidden in another location. And where was this location? Right beneath its archway. And with almost the exact same glide to set up the swim in air glitch, you can glide right into Dragon Shores. There were a couple of advantages to using the permanent fireball power-up to fight Ripto. Firstly, it completely removes RNG from the fight, and you can just blast him in all 3 phases to defeat him as quickly as possible. And secondly, this permanent fireball power-up actually deals more damage per hit in phases 1 and 2, making the fight even faster. However, there was also the obvious drawback. Was the alternate path worth it? You now had to spend over a minute to perform a detour with another difficult trick, the flop over the wall, and then come back to Winter Tundra to perform swim in air. The answer to that question wasn't thoroughly investigated at the time. Runners were just happy to completely remove RNG from the final fight in the run, and thus, a new endgame route was born. Racing Spyro 2 Any% had seen fluctuating popularity from the end of 2012 through to 2013. Many of the old runners were typically playing the longer and more complicated 40 orb and 100% categories, while newer, less experienced runners were learning and playing Any%. Saboom had found himself in a position where no one else was really competing for Crash's world record, and he alone would try to claim it. He continued to improve at the game and set out to find as many new gem routes, tricks, and techniques as he could. Aside from the double jump, any specific time-saving trick was used only once, maybe twice throughout the run. Each one of these tricks, since their implementation, would save a single chunk of time over older runs. What if there was a new technique that could be used over and over to save time in multiple locations? That's exactly what Saboom would find. Throughout the game, gems can be found in many different states, but the three most common ones are either loose on the ground, within baskets, or within vases. When you travel near some loose gems on the ground, Sparks, Spyro's dragonfly companion, can pick them up for you. Vases are immune to Spyro's flame, so they must be charged into to release their valuable contents. Baskets, on the other hand, can be opened either with a flame or a charge. The techniques Saboom would find would be useful on many of the baskets throughout the run, due to their property of being able to be opened both by a flame and a charge. Normally, when you flame a basket, the gem will fly up into the air and land before Sparks can pick it up for you. This is obviously quite slow, so speedrunners would charge into baskets because the gems would automatically home into Spyro, and you would never have to stop moving to collect them. Saboom had found that if you flame a basket from a distance and begin charging before the flame opens the basket, the gems would actually still home into Spyro, if you were still within close enough proximity to the basket. Depending on the angle of your movements coming towards and leaving the basket, the trick could save up to a second or two each time, and over the course of a whole run, this would add up to some serious time saved. Unfortunately for history, Saboom possibly did not highlight or stream all of his world record runs, and his primary YouTube channel, which was filled with large amounts of historic Spyro footage, was deleted some time ago. However, Crash vouchers that Saboom had a low 29 or even a high 28-minute run by mid-January 2013, and Jumpyluff and Shaw8B suggest even lower times achieved by Saboom later that year. On August 25th, 2013, Saboom would stream a run on Twitch and highlight a new world record. Along with the flame charge to open baskets and the early fireball to fight Ripto, several other new improvements to the run had been made. Jumpyluff had found a very consistent way to skip the final door in Sunny Beach, which saves a handful of seconds. There was also a new order to play the 4 lower levels in Autumn Plains. The order was now Crystal Glacier, Skelos Badlands, Zephyr, and then Breeze Harbor. Along with this level order being faster due to the shorter distance travelled, it was also advantageous to play Breeze Harbor last due to this glide, known as Ground to Portal, which gets Spyro in position to perform Climb Skip much faster. There was also a new early game gem route for purchasing Swim, which was found by a new runner who was rising up the ranks. I'll talk about him later. With all of these routing updates, Saboom entered the final section of the game cleanly ahead of Crash. The detour to get Fireball early costed him exactly 1 minute compared to Crash's run, but the power-up was overwhelming. Saboom saved that minute back and then some, ultimately saving another 25 seconds over Crash in the final segment of the run. The final time was 28 minutes and 21 seconds. Saboom's execution was at least on par with Crash's, maybe even a little bit better. He was more daring in his execution, going for many jumps and glides with little or no time to set up, and it showed with him slipping and falling in a few places. Just over a week later, on September 2nd, Saboom had lowered it again, a modest improvement to 28 minutes and 16 seconds. And judging from the fact he did not highlight this run, he knew he was capable of a much faster run very soon. In fact, he knew it was going to happen.
Something told me that today was the day for 27 to finally be hit. Just a premonition.
The day was September 3rd, 2013, and Saboom had pulled out a small lead of 6 seconds after Glimmer and Idle Springs. This was it. He knew this was the one to be the run. Saboom had set a new gold standard for Spyro 2 any%, with a time of 27 minutes and 52 seconds. He had nailed almost every major time-saving trick on his first attempt. The Gulp fight featured 5 double hits, faster than any fight we've seen previously, and any mistakes he made throughout the run were not only very minor, but few and far between. Following this any% record, Saboom went on to set world records in Spyro 2 100%, Spyro 3 any%, and Spyro 3 117%, all within a couple of months. And that's just naming a few. He was clearly playing at a top level in a handful of games and categories, which few speedrunners can compete with. Over the years, we've seen the world record change hands several times. It started with Laponier and Ratchet, all the way back in 2008 and 9. From there, Neviutz studied the newly created tool-assisted speedrun and seized control with inferior hardware. Shortly after, competition brewed through racing the game on Speedruns Live, with several runners in contention for the record, but Crash proved sustained dominance over them all. And finally, the newcomer. Saboom in late 2013 had abandoned almost all timidness in execution to have the world record within his clutch. You see this new marker here? This is approximately when the next world record happened, about 2.5 months later on November 23rd. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who got this world record, or more accurately, I can't tell you how many people got this world record. This was when everything changed, and the Spyro 2 any% time was going down. Way down. Spyro 2 had just been broken in half. Hot off his tail in finding major skips in both Spyro 1 and Spyro 3, Touval had finally cracked the puzzle of finding a usable out of bounds to get into Gulp without any talismans. This skip was so revolutionary, it caused a category split, with this new route being usable for any% and the newly created 14 talisman category, which all of the older runs could qualify for. Touval's discovery had eliminated the 100 gems to use the submarine in Aquaria Towers, and the need to play any of the 13 levels after Glimmer which had talismans, which meant another 800 gems were saved since we no longer had to purchase Zephyr and Shady Oasis. Finally, Crush Skip was usable in any% runs, and the only remaining payment to Moneybags was the ability to swim underwater so we could skip into Ripto. The game was blown wide open. So how did this trick work? Well, in Autumn Plains, there is a breakable wall which hides the intended path to the tallest tower. It turns out that this breakable wall was the key to Gulp Skip. When you approach this wall from behind, it's actually completely invisible and you can pass right through it. Touval had cleverly approached the wall from behind and stopped inside of it. He then turns Spyro almost parallel to the wall and then slowly shuffles Spyro into the actual solid wall. Eventually, Spyro can clip downwards onto the floor in the hallway. With Spyro now half inbounds and half inside of the wall, Touval hopped over to the steps which engages Spyro in a flop animation. He then turns Spyro towards some terrain and then bonks to fall out of bounds and then glides right into Gulp. While this trick was indeed game-changing, the consistency with which runners could successfully pull it off was abysmally low, totally eclipsing every other trick in difficulty. Firstly, the time it would take to clip downward onto the floor of the hallway could vary quite tremendously. And secondly, as you move Spyro towards the stairs, if you aren't precise with your movements, the game could easily push you totally in bounds, and it could take half a minute or more to try the trick again. Runs would almost single-handedly come down to how fast or how few tries a successful skip was performed, and this caused the world record to change hands every few hours. While Touval had discovered this trick, he was no slouch at speedrunning Spyro either. On November 26th, he was able to complete a run with a first try Gulp skip and finished with a final time of 13 minutes and 44 seconds. While it was incredible he had performed Gulp skip on his first try in this run, it was very clear that this time could go way lower. There were small mistakes everywhere, and the gem route was extremely inefficient. Even the Gulp fight itself could be improved, as it only had 3 double hits. It was obvious that this world record was hinged upon the fact that he had gotten Gulp skip on his first try. I just want to touch up on a couple of things. Firstly, the basic route for the most early runs which included Gulp skip. Basically, runners would collect almost all 500 gems before defeating Gulp, and only pick up the last in Winter Tundra before travelling back to Summer Forest to purchase Swim. They would then travel back to Winter Tundra, go get the permanent Fireball power-up from Dragon Shores, and then go defeat Ripto. And secondly, with many of the new top runners not being from an NTSC region, they were playing on an emulator which had substantially slower load times compared to an NTSC PlayStation 2 with fast disk speed. So in order to level the playing field, the NTSC PlayStation 2 runners would play on their PS2s, but without fast disk speed, which would now give a very small advantage to the emulator players in terms of load times. Anyway, on the very next day, on November 27th, Dustiel would claim the world record with a time of 13 minutes and 9 seconds. And unfortunately, no video of this run exists today. A few hours later, Saboom would snatch the world record back with a time of 12 minutes and 57 seconds. And the video was uploaded to his primary YouTube channel, which, as I mentioned before, had since been deleted. It had only been a few days since the discovery of Gulp skip, and most runners were becoming increasingly frustrated at how inconsistent this trick was. So, they made the trick better. Instead of going towards the stairs to fall out of bounds, they began travelling in the other direction after clipping, towards this pillar, and this became known as the pillar method. On November 30th, Touval was able to secure a 12:02 using the new pillar method. His gem route hadn't changed and was still largely inefficient, but he had cleaned up his execution since his last world record a few days ago. The Gulp fight was also quite a bit faster, and now featured 4 double hits. December rolled around, and just 2 days in, Shaw 8B was able to cut the time down to 11:51 on just his 3rd attempt at the category, and was the first to break the 12-minute barrier. He had made small improvements to the overall gem route, which was enough to secure the world record, even with a Gulp fight which featured 3 double hits. Touval wasn't going to sleep on his world record being taken, and fought back with some firepower. He had come up with a new and improved gem route. This route sacrificed about 130 gems before Gulp, which he deemed as inefficient, and picked up these gems later in Winter Tundra. Given he would spend more time in Winter Tundra now, he would actually go and get the permanent Fireball power before going to purchase Swim in Summer Forest. And with a run that now featured 4 double hits on Gulp, Touval was able to get an 11:37 with this new route. Saboom was not sleeping either. He too was also searching for a faster gem route and any other trick he could use to save time over his competitors. His gem route ended up being largely similar to the one Touval used, but he was also going to incorporate a new trick called a Proxy. A Proxy is a technique used in all 3 original Spyro games. There are a few different types of proxies, and they all involve having Spyro's hitbox intersect with another object's hitbox. A perfect example of how a proxy works and how to perform one can be shown with this chest in Idle Springs. Firstly, take note of how Spyro cannot actually stand on the lid of the chest, because the top of the chest's hitbox is shaped like a dome. However, Spyro can actually touch the lid of the chest by charging across the top of it. What if Spyro stopped charging while inside of the normally impenetrable dome? Well, the game does not like this, and to prevent Spyro from getting stuck, it will eject him at high speed. If you can exit the charge animation while inside one of these hitboxes, you can get incredible amounts of height. In September of 2013, Nitrovsky was creating a task for Spyro 3, and was thinking about how some enemies in certain states have similar hitbox properties as to the top of the chest in Idle Springs. He was able to demonstrate a proxy during the invincibility frames off of one of the enemies. Very soon after this, it was noticed that most fodder enemies had this same hitbox property, even during their short death animation. On December 9th, 2013, Saboom was able to pull out a modest lead with a proxy on a frog fodder in Summer Forest at the cost of a few gems which he would collect elsewhere. From here, Saboom's lead over Touval slowly dwindled, but he was able to hold on and finished with a final time of 11 minutes and 36 seconds, 1 second faster than Touval. It had been a crazy couple of weeks for Spyro 2, and it was all due to Touval's incredible tenacity and ingenuity. Gulp Skip had even found a use in the 100% category, where it was now optimal to beat the game back to front, more or less. With only 1 second apart between their personal bests, the stage was set for a new rivalry to begin between the top two any% runners, Saboom and Touval. The final piece of the any% puzzle had just fallen into place. ESGPuppetmaster had just discovered a way into Ripto that didn't require the 500 gem purchase for Swim. This new trick, called Waterfall Proxy, works very similarly to the enemy proxies I had described before. In this case, Spyro's hitbox is intersecting with the hitbox of some of the terrain. With some excellent timing and positioning, an insane amount of height can be attained. Unfortunately, the joy over Waterfall Proxy quickly turned to disdain. The trick was incredibly precise and difficult to pull off. To put it into perspective, I asked speedrunner Drashed to put into order a list of 10 tricks that I picked in which a runner would most likely have to worry about in a run. This is what he came back with. As you can see, Waterfall Proxy is at the very bottom, being the most difficult and probable to ruin a run. Gulp Skip doesn't even sneak into the more difficult half. With Touval revealing that he was going to invest into a PlayStation 2, all other top PS2 runners began to play on fast disk speed. And on February 28, 2014, ESGPuppetmaster was able to set a new world record with a time of 11 minutes and 28 seconds using his newly discovered trick. Just look at this nonsense. This isn't me cutting or rewinding the footage. This is what it's like just trying to get into the correct spot for Waterfall Proxy, with the camera bouncing around every which way. Once in the correct position, Puppet turns Spyro very carefully so that one more move would eject Spyro, and then BAM! Successful Proxy. Unfortunately, the rest of the run was pretty mediocre, but Waterfall Proxy saved so much time, it was almost enough to single-handedly get him the world record. In early March, Hitekaimerr was able to briefly take the world record from ESGPuppetmaster. No footage of this world record exists today, and no one can quite recall the time that was achieved. One notable thing about this run though, was that Hitekaimerr used the old 500 gem route and bought Swim. This just goes to show how unoptimized a lot of Puppet's run was. Waterfall Proxy was so tough that almost every runner refused to go for it. It was just too demoralizing for many to have a world record run destroyed by a trick they barely understood. With the arrival of his PlayStation 2, Touval immediately began to work on understanding and upping his consistency with Waterfall Proxy. If he was going to get the world record, he was going to go all out. In reality, he was now the only person willing to put in the attempts. Even Saboom wanted nothing to do with Waterfall Proxy, and instead put his focus on the longer 14 talisman category. Puppet wasn't very interested in doing his own any% runs either, but would eventually create a tutorial on how to perform the proxy, which ended up being over an hour long. Once Touval got going on his any% runs, no one was going to be able to stop him. With a new world record on March 25th, Touval's any% reign would begin. The early section of the run was pretty good, and Gulp Skip was performed decently quick, especially the final part inside of the pillar to fall out of bounds. However, the Gulp fight was a little slow, and due to some awkward placements for the weapons, Touval only managed 3 double hits. He also really struggled in this run to get over the wall in Dragon Shores, taking 8 attempts to do so. When it was time for Waterfall Proxy, Touval fell at the first step, trying to clip into the geometry, and had to try again. The Ripto fight also could have been better. He messed up the final hit in Phase 1, which also meant he couldn't get the early hit in Phase 2. And he also missed the early hit in Phase 3. The final time of this run was 10 minutes and 37 seconds. Given this was over 50 seconds faster than Puppet's run, and the mistakes made on some crucial tricks, Touval was capable of an incredibly fast time. All he needed to do was more attempts. On the very next day, Touval was able to lower it again, down to 10 minutes and 18 seconds. He had decided he would forego the Frog Proxy in Summer Forest. He wanted more solid runs into the late game. Gulp Skip was as problematic as ever, and he lost 15 seconds here to his previous run. The Gulp fight was superb up until the final egg cycle. Gulp decides to pick up one of the weapons, and with a rocket already in Spyro's mouth, Touval was hoping for a barrel.
Barrel. Fucking ball, of course. Of course. The fucking hell. Had to be.
He didn't get it. This time, Dragon Shores went much better, getting over the wall on his third try, saving another 15 seconds. Unfortunately, Touval fell again while trying to get into position for Waterfall Proxy, and had to settle for getting the trick second try. The Ripto fight was much cleaner. He missed the early hit in Phase 2, but still managed to save over 6 seconds on that previous fight. And then, it happened. On March 31st, 2014, Touval was able to finally complete a run with a first try Waterfall Proxy. Once again, the front end of the run was very solid. Gulp Skip was decent, with him saving about 8 seconds on his previous run. However, the Gulp fight began poorly, with the first drop cycle placing the barrels on completely the opposite sides of the arena, making a double hit impossible. And remember, you're guaranteed bombs when Gulp has 9 hit points, so that means another guaranteed single hit. I'm not sure what happened on this cycle, but Spyro just refused to pick up this rocket. Another double hit missed out on. Touval finished this fight with only 3 double hits. This time, Dragon Shores was perfect, getting over the wall on his first attempt. Waterfall Proxy began shakily, as Touval almost falls several times trying to clip into the mountain's geometry. Fortunately, he gets Spyro in the correct position and angle very quickly, and the final steps of the proxy were executed extremely well, and this saved 40 seconds on his previous run. With his nerves cranked all the way up, Touval missed a couple of crucial shots on Ripto in Phase 3, costing him a few seconds. Nevertheless, the final time was 9 minutes and 41 seconds, the first ever sub 10 minute run of Spyro 2. Touval had just lowered the any % world record by over a minute and a half within just 6 days. The only other person that could possibly best him at a Waterfall Proxy consistency contest was its creator, ESGPuppetmaster, but he wasn't as consistent at the rest of the game. Even with all of the potential areas that could be improved on in Touval's run, it was extremely likely that a world record was just impossible without a first try Waterfall Proxy. The trick was just too precise, too late in the run, or just too dumb for anyone else to go for. There was only one person considered to be Touval's equal in both skill and tenacity, and he was the only person willing to step up and beat the 941. Saboom was back. He had just completed a grind of the 14 talisman category, taking the world record down to 26 minutes flat. There were a plethora of new tricks that had been incorporated since his 2752, most of them being proxies on the fodder enemies in the various levels. Saboom now had his eyes totally focused on reclaiming the any % record back, and he was going to do it on his own terms. Maybe it was because he wanted to prove to himself that he could do it. Maybe because he believed that this was the last time something like this was ever going to be possible. Or maybe because he was just so stubborn. But he was going to get that world record back. And it was going to be with the 500 gem swim route.
Oh shit. I just don't think this is gonna be it. I'm not gonna get the second penguin, but hey, it got far. Yo, I can do this! I can do this! Has there ever been a worse choke in the history of speedrunning?
Saboom had set himself a seemingly impossible task. He had a vague idea of what he needed in order to beat Touval. Just a frog proxy, a flawless climb skip, a fast gulp skip, a 5-cycle gulp, a new penguin proxy in Winter Tundra, a seamless Dragon Shores out of bounds, a second penguin proxy, nailing swim in air, and an incredible Ripto fight. He would have to execute this all to damn near perfection, and the gem route required would be the most optimal this game would ever see. On attempt 1488, Saboom had a lead of a few seconds over his PB of 9 minutes 50. As long as he could get the second penguin proxy on his first try, he would save even more time and have a clear shot at reclaiming the world record.
And I totally just got first try. This could be something.
Heartbreaking. He had missed swim in air, a trick that should almost be automatic for top runners. But one little positioning mistake, and the run was over in an instant. But no matter, Saboom would keep grinding, and he would have another shot a few hundred attempts later. Run 1897 was Saboom's best yet. It started out a little slow, but with an incredible gulp skip and fight, Saboom was ahead of his PB by over 8 seconds. It didn't stop there though, because Saboom's Dragon Shore split was executed to absolute perfection, and the lead was extended to a monstrous 14.5 seconds. He just needed to not mess up.
I cannot believe I just did that. Can you guys believe that? Can you honestly believe that? Has there ever been a worse choke in the history of speedrunning? I could have just gone right into the mountains. Why did I cut that off?
His nerves had gotten the better of him, and another attempt was thrown into the gutter. Saboom was going at this extremely hard. Even though he had amassed nearly 2,000 attempts, he had only been grinding for about 2 weeks, and was playing upwards of 8 or more hours per day. It was only a matter of time.
Oh yeah, 2,000 hype, holy shit. Alright, let's see what happens.
Run 2000 had come around, and the moment Saboom hit Frog Proxy, there was hope.
There he is. There is hope for Run 2000.
Saboom breezed through the rest of Summer Forest and Crush, and then it was on to Climb Skip and Gulp Skip.
Don't give me the little jump bounce thing.
A small bonk on Climb Skip cost maybe 1.5 seconds, but nothing to really worry about. Saboom really pushed Spyro for Gulp Skip. He couldn't play this trick steady and safe, as he needed to save as much time as possible, but he couldn't be overly reckless either, unless he wanted a fast track back to the title screen.
Oh shit. Oh, okay. No, we got a fall, thank you. Alright, run number 2000 is about to roll some dice.
Saboom's Gulp fight was off to a flying start, nailing the first 4 double hits. On the final egg cycle, the first egg to hatch is a rocket. As he heads towards it, he notices the other 2 eggs are bombs.
Don't be a bomb. No, it is a bomb. What? Oh, I got it! Ugh!
He barely clutches that final double hit. Then, it was Penguin Proxy 1 and getting over the wall in Dragon Shores. Saboom had fallen silent, totally focused on his inputs and the run. Then, he began to speak to his audience.
Only 3.8. Only 3.8. I don't think I could get the record, dude. I need a little bit more time to work with, man. I just don't think this is gonna be it. I just don't think this is gonna be it. I'm not gonna get Penguin.
Hello there. Ray.
I'm not gonna get the second Penguin. I'm calling it right now. But hey, it got far, okay? Run number 2000. Run 2000 was pretty hype.
Run 2000 was pretty hype. Saboom didn't know it yet, but one of his previous statements couldn't have been further from the truth. He had hit swim in air and was about to enter the final boss a few seconds behind his rival, Touval. But this didn't matter. His resolve had been restored.
Yo, I can do this! I can do this! I need a really good Ripto. I know I'm behind, but Touval got a really bad Ripto. Yo, I can fucking do this. Yo, if I ever needed a good phase 3, it's right fucking now, please. Oh, I hit him! I hit him, that's big. That's important. I hit him right then. Oh my god, what the fuck? Ah, yes! Yes! 938! 938! 938. Rip all you motherfucking headphone users. Cause I just got 938. Oh my god. It was run number 2000, dude.
Saboom had done it. He had taken back the world record using his own method and his own route. Every Spyro speedrunner and fan, even Touval, celebrated Saboom's incredible 938. Even though the route was by far inferior to those that used Waterfall Proxy, Saboom had proven that he didn't need Waterfall Proxy to get the world record back. And to this day, this run still remains the fastest run ever performed, with the 500 gem swim route. Following this world record, Saboom wanted a break from Spyro 2, so he moved on to other games, and Touval had briefly moved back to Spyro 1 before taking a break altogether. With the top two any percent runners away from Spyro 2, and no one wanting to best Saboom at the 500 gem route, and no one wanting to deal with Waterfall Proxy, the 938 would stand as the world record for some time. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, so bear with me. It will all make sense soon enough. On July 16th, 2014, there was a three-way race between Hitekaimerr, Dustiel, and Grant Chill, which took place on Speedruns Live. The run was called Theatre Percent, and this race was one of a kind. The goal of the race wasn't to defeat Ripto, but it was to access the theatre in Dragon Shores, a place where you can re-watch the cutscenes that played throughout the game. Normally, the entrance to the theatre can only be accessed once the player has collected 10 tokens from all of the minigames found within Dragon Shores. A few hours before the race, Grant Chill had found an interesting glitch which was called Coaster Escape. Coaster Escape was an interesting little gimmick. It allowed Spyro to jump off the cart right at the start of the roller coaster minigame, and you would then have free control over Spyro in an area he isn't supposed to be. To perform Coaster Escape, Grant Chill simply talked to the NPC to begin the roller coaster minigame, and right before the game warps Spyro onto the cart, you perform a very precisely timed charge jump while holding down and left. Grant was now looking for something to do up here on the roller coaster tracks, and he decided to try and glide onto the theatre building. And like many other places that are high up and not supposed to be within Spyro's reach, he simply passed through the roof and into the theatre. On the cutscene selection screen, if you select the very bottom one titled Come On Sparks, this will immediately play the final cutscene in the game, which tells us that Ripto is defeated. Now I know what you're all thinking. This has got to be way faster than the other routes used for any percent, right? Well, the answer to that question is yes, it was way faster. But everyone knew this wasn't really the end of the run, and Ripto wasn't really defeated. So all that ended up happening was a fun, one-off race between Hitekaimerr, Dustiel, and Grant Chill. And the true power of Coaster Escape wasn't realized until February 2015, when Touval made his return. Coaster Escape and Theatre had been known for months, and only Touval had noticed that playing the final cutscene affected the game in a big way. It removed all instances of moneybags throughout the game, and granted access to all of the things you would normally have purchased from him, including all of the abilities, which meant Swim could now be attained without collecting any gems. Touval quickly rerouted the Dragon Shores portion of the run to include the new discovery. After going over the wall and out of bounds, he would immediately run to the roller coaster minigame and perform Coaster Escape, and then quickly get into the theatre to play the final cutscene. Once he exited the theatre, he would then perform Coaster Escape a second time so he could access the permanent Fireball power-up. Along with this major update to the route, he would also update the strategy he used on the Crush fight, which now saved about 2.5 seconds. He would also go back to using Frog Proxy in Summer Forest, and would also include the Penguin Proxy in Winter Tundra. On March 9th, 2015, Touval would compound all of these improvements into a single run. Unfortunately, he got totally ripped off on this phase of Gulp, where after hitting the barrel, it gets destroyed by Gulp's bounce from the previous hit. Luckily, on the very next drop cycle, Touval was blessed with 2 barrels and a rocket in excellent positions, and was able to score a triple hit to make up for the previous single hit. The fight was over in 5 phases. Touval executed the end of the route perfectly, nailing both coaster escapes and the swim in air. Although the Ripto fight was decent, he missed the early final hit and lost about 7 seconds to Saboom's incredible fight. The final time of this run was 9 minutes and 23 seconds, a new world record. Coaster Escape and Theatre would remain as a staple in the any percent category for some time, with many runners incorporating it into their runs and setting personal bests. There was only one real issue with the new route: it was still slower than Waterfall Proxy. Over the next few months, Gulp Skip would get another upgrade. ZBM, a relatively new runner, came up with the first pillarless technique, which became known as the charge jump method. It was substantially faster than using the pillar, but also required a good angle, as well as precise timing of your inputs. Soon after this, Gulp Skip would be improved again to the most modern method by none other than Touval himself. Instead of performing the very precise charge jump, Touval had opted for a charge glide. The charge glide was only slightly slower than the charge jump, and even though the inputs are very similar, the timing of the inputs was much friendlier. Seeking another world record improvement, Touval then went back to running any percent. He really wanted to make sure that this time, the world record included the most optimal route, and that meant the dreaded Waterfall Proxy was back. On October 6th, 2015, Touval would make that a reality. His early game was phenomenal, with Glimmer going very well and the most seamless Summer Forest scene thus far. Climb Skip was performed to a high standard, but the real highlight of this run was this. An insanely fast Gulp Skip. At this point, he was miles ahead of his personal best. Unfortunately, Gulp would once again cause trouble for Touval. Bad RNG would place the barrels in terrible positions and he would have to settle for a single hit. And then on the guaranteed rockets phase, more bad RNG would cause one of the eggs to despawn. Touval lost about 15 seconds here to his previous run. The poor Gulp split would not hold Touval up. He would go on to nail Penguin Proxy once again, and got over the wall first try in Dragon Shores. Waterfall Proxy was next, and with the incredible height he got from this one, he glided right into Ripto, well ahead of the world record. Touval couldn't catch a break, and this Ripto fight was not his finest. He didn't predict the correct lines Ripto would take, and lost several seconds. However, this run was still executed to an incredible standard, and the final time was 8 minutes and 50 seconds, the first ever sub 9 minute run of Spyro 2. While Touval's fight was incredible, it was most definitely beatable, as both the Gulp and Ripto fights could be improved. The Gulp Skip itself was nigh unmatchable in terms of speed for a human. You would be almost guaranteed to lose time against a skip of this caliber. And while Waterfall Proxy was executed quite well, it could be done faster through more reckless gameplay. It seemed very likely that the only way to beat this run was to either find something new or best Touval at the Waterfall Proxy route. In early February of 2016, Saboom briefly returned to running any %. Still adamant as ever to never ever do Waterfall Proxy, he decided to implement a new movement technique that he had developed. By repeatedly inputting charging and gliding inputs along an inclined wall and maintaining a good angle for Spyro, you can effectively glide while conserving, or in some cases gain height. This type of movement was dubbed as the Sproderman, or Sproder for short, and was a combination of the words Spyro and Spider-Man. Sproderman would prove useful in getting onto the roller coaster track much faster from the starting area in Dragon Shores, and remove the first of the 2 tricky coaster escapes. This route change saves quite a large chunk of time, and Saboom was able to lower his PB 6 times in a single week, with the final personal best being an 8:53, just 3 seconds behind Touval. Saboom was such a good player, with a slightly better run, he could take back the world record using another unoptimal route. That day would never come though, as this would be Saboom's final personal best in the any % category, as he had hit his goal of a sub 9-minute run. All of a sudden, Touval's 8-minute 50-second world record didn't seem so invincible. It could still be beaten using an inferior route as long as it was executed extremely well. Touval would have none of this, as he wanted the world record to have the most optimal route. And on March 19th, 2016, he had the opportunity to send the any % time into the stratosphere.
Bollocks.
Touval frantically tried to scale the staircase again, but it didn't matter. The run was dead. Ultimately, he was never able to take down his own 8-minute 50-second run, and both Touval and Saboom would end their Spyro 2 any % rivalry side by side. It was the dawn of a new era for Spyro 2 any %, and beginning in June of 2016, Lewis B99 would begin to rise up the rankings. His first PB of 10 minutes 52 didn't last long. Within 3 days, he had lowered it by a minute to a 9:52, using the same route as Saboom. A little over a month later, he set 2 more personal bests on back-to-back days, a 9:34 and a 9:19, using a slight change in the Dragon Shores route. The tweak was to go and collect Fireball first, and then abuse a Death Warp to go back to the starting area, and then Sproder onto the coaster to get into the theatre. This route removed coaster escape and improved consistency at the cost of a few seconds. Lewis had become very, very good at executing Gulp skip with a high degree of speed and consistency, and his fundamentals in the movement of Spyro were superb. He was now itching to take down Touval's 850, and he finally decided he would learn how to perform Waterfall Proxy.
Cool. Got it first try, as opposed to I got it like 20th try last run. Oh damn, the pace.
On October 22nd, 2016, Lewis had found himself on an incredible pace after his Dragon Shore split. His Waterfall Proxy went, well, he got ejected out of the terrain, but he can fly around and try again. Less than 10 seconds lost. This time, he clips into the terrain correctly and begins to shuffle Spyro into the precise. One down tap too many, and he proxied when he wasn't ready to execute the jump. Lewis was able to get a good enough proxy on his 3rd try and finished the run with a final time of 9 minutes and 11 seconds. A couple of weeks later, on November 6th, Lewis was able to get a similar pace run up to Waterfall Proxy, and this time, things were...
Oh my god!
What happened?
This might be world record. I just got Waterfall Proxy. This
Did you
should
get
be
it?
world record. This should be world record. What the fuck? No! Don't do this to me, game.
Please, world record.
This cannot be happening. Ah, choked away this. I can't.
Didn't you?
That was tough to watch. Lewis had that run in the bag, but he just could not execute that final phase of Ripto. For the rest of 2016, Lewis would spend time away from any percent, playing the longer categories and some other games. It was a new year for Lewis. Feeling refreshed, he came back to take down Touval's 850. On his grind, he managed to score a small personal best of 8 minutes and 56 seconds. And on January 22nd, 2017, he would finally have the run he was looking for. Unfortunately for Lewis, this hit occurred during Ripto's invincibility frames, costing him 5 seconds. He ended with a final time of 8 minutes and 51 seconds, a mere 1 second behind Touval. Lewis wasn't one to give up, and maybe it was a good thing that that previous run didn't beat Touval by just a few seconds, because his best was yet to come. 5 days later, on January 27th, he would find himself on the run of a lifetime. After months and months of improving at every facet of the game and enduring several chokes, Lewis had accomplished what he had set out to do, surpass Touval's 850. This victory for Lewis was bittersweet. He had achieved his ultimate goal, and yet this run was not the world record.
Oh my god. Look how close this is to the world record. Like, what?
During Lewis's rise up the leaderboard, there was another person who became known to be exceptionally good at the various tricks in the Spyro series, even becoming one of the best at Waterfall Proxy. He even posted several in-depth tutorials on how to perform these tricks in order to help newer runners. On November 9th, 2016, 3 days after Lewis's 858, a speedrunner by the name of Retro submitted a run to the Spyro 2 leaderboards with a time of 8 minutes and 29 seconds. Unfortunately, no footage of this run exists today. There were some members of the community that believed that this run was not legitimate. Even though Retro had proven himself to be extremely good at the most difficult tricks in the game and had outstanding game knowledge, he was a divisive figure in the community, and this was his first submitted run. His time was carefully scrutinized by moderators, and after some deliberation, they verified the run, as no foul play was found. Lewis had missed out on the world record by a single second again. However, this time, there was no coming back. Being totally satisfied with his 830, he moved on to other ventures. For the rest of 2017, Retro's 829 would sit at the pinnacle of the any percent leaderboard. There are plenty of people still playing this category, but they were competing amongst themselves, using the suboptimal coaster and theatre strategies. Towards the end of 2018, a new runner, Moxy, had come out of nowhere and began to shoot up the leaderboard. On December 1st, he managed to become the 5th person to get a sub 9-minute run, and before the end of the year, he had surpassed Touval with a time of 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Since 2017, there had only been one new strategy added to the run, but taking a hit in the lava just before Crush launches his attack, the attack on that phase would be skipped, and this can be repeated 3 times, saving 1 second each. Any time save at this point was more than worth it. Like Lewis and Retro, Moxy was remarkably good at the most difficult portions of the run, and was amongst the most consistent at Waterfall Proxy. In fact, not only was Moxy quite consistent, he could also perform it very fast, using different visual cues to set up a good position. By the end of February 2019, Moxy had inched tantalizingly close to the world record, now being only 3 seconds away. And finally, on March 21st, 2019, a couple of seconds ahead of the world record, he would execute this insanely fast Waterfall Proxy, setting a gold split and extending his lead even further. Moxy would execute a very strong Ripto, never missing a beat and hitting all the crucial early hits, and ended the run with a record time of 8:23. Moxy's run was very good, and yet there were still some glaring areas he lost time. Through no fault of his own, he had to watch this bird despawn with an egg right in front of him during the rockets phase on Gulp, costing him about 10 seconds. And while he would save time by gliding from the wall towards Fireball in Dragon Shores, he also lost time because he didn't get on it first try. If he was luckier on the Gulp fight and got on the wall first try in Dragon Shores, this run would have been in the low 8:10s, or perhaps even lower. After his world record was beaten, Retro returned as he had a new project on his hands. He would stream attempts over several hours, and if he played offline, he would update moderators on his progress. Eventually, he was able to beat Moxy and take the world record back with a time of 8:15. Shockingly, shortly after this, he was able to lower it again to a near unbelievable time of 8 minutes and 8 seconds. Retro's reputation in the community hadn't really changed since his first record of 8:29. There were still several people that thought that these times were fake. Even the moderators in charge of verifying runs were suspicious of these times, with the runs being in verification limbo for some time and nothing being found wrong with them. They were verified. Careful analysis of Retro's runs didn't end even after verification. After more and more evidence piled up, 2 moderators eventually confronted Retro about an undisclosed discrepancy in one of the videos, and he eventually admitted that both the 8:15 and 8:08, as well as several other runs, had been cheated and was thus banned from the leaderboards. This discrepancy remains undisclosed even to this day, in case it needed to be used again. Because of this, Lewis's time of 8 minutes and 30 seconds was finally validated as the official world record from January 27th, 2017 up until March 21st of 2019, where Moxy took it with an 8:23. After all of this, Neviutz, one of the moderators who had confronted Retro, had grown frustrated about another issue caused by Waterfall Proxy. The fact of the matter is that any speedrunner, even one with just basic knowledge of the trick, could go for it in a run and pull it off. Though the trick was extremely precise, there wasn't anything truly demanding skill-wise. Describing the trick as hard isn't exactly right. A better description of it is extremely inconsistent. Speedrunners like ESGPuppetmaster, Touval, Lewis, and Moxy had put in the time and effort to become as consistent with it as they could possibly be, and this allowed them to even use it in runs, and hope to pull it off on a good pace. Because of Waterfall Proxy's high inconsistency and the massive time save it gave, it would be hard for moderators to justify why any runner, regardless of skill level, couldn't have just happened to get Waterfall Proxy on a good run. This led Neviutz to look for an alternative way to skip into Ripto. Ever since Waterfall Proxy's discovery, there were some other highly theoretical ways to get into Ripto. However, they ended up being even more unreliable, and could only really be pulled off in a tool-assisted speedrun. Neviutz used Swim in Air to explore around Winter Tundra, looking for anything he could use that might allow him to get into Ripto. There was even a death plane to prevent players from getting around back and behind the castle. If Spyro touched this plane, he would be put into the flop animation permanently until he fell to his death. Though, it was known that this death plane didn't extend upwards forever, and Neviutz began to map out exactly where it began and ended. To his surprise, the top of the plane wasn't up here, it was here. It was then that Neviutz theorized that it might be possible to sprout it into Ripto. While the technique for sproutering was well established, sprout it into Ripto posed a new set of challenges. The geometry of the outer wall of the castle was like no other, and there was going to be a lot of intricate movement involved. While you still had to maintain a good angle for Spyro at all times, and stay in contact with the wall for as long as possible to prevent height loss, you also had to navigate around the pillars. If you came off the wall too early to get around the pillar, you would lose too much height, and if you came off the wall too late, you would bonk and fall to your death. The final section of the trick is just a straight glide to the end, so you need to get as much height as possible before coming off the second pillar. On July 15th, 2019, after upwards of 15 or more hours grinding the trick over and over, with a blistered and bleeding thumb, Neviutz managed to successfully perform a Spyro into Ripto. Finally, there was an alternative to Waterfall Proxy, and not only was this trick 100% skill-based, it was faster. After Neviutz proved that this trick could be done by a human, many runners flocked to try it out for themselves, as was also a faster alternative in the much longer categories. Every single person found this trick unfathomably difficult. Even veteran runners who were considered the best at Spyroing knew that it would take hours and hours of practice to get it even once. Upon hearing Waterfall Proxy was obsolete, Saboom briefly returned for a couple of weeks to Spyro 2, grinding out some practice and setting a personal best in the 14 talisman category using Spyro into Ripto before moving on again. Upon seeing this, another speedrunner by the name of Super Dawn felt inspired and relished the challenge, and was the first to really grind out the trick, finding all the intricacies, and would set an example for how consistent a person could actually get. Over the next few months, Super Dawn would practice Spyro into Ripto relentlessly, sometimes dedicating entire days to grinding the trick. In his learning, he had found a couple of strategical improvements. On the initial jump, he cut left harder, making contact with the outer wall of the castle sooner. This put the Spyro inputs in slightly more favourable positions for when it was time to navigate the pillars. A second issue Super Dawn noticed was when Spyro got enough height, he would now be in contact with a less steep part of the wall. If you weren't ready for this transition, Spyro would end up losing a bunch of height, and this could be mitigated by adjusting Spyro's angle slightly. 70%. That was Super Dawn's peak consistency with Spyro into Ripto. Even though he was the only person truly consistent with the trick, he wouldn't really go for the world record in any percent, but still did a few runs so he could practice the trick under pressure in preparation for the longer 14 talisman category. He had done what needed to be done, and the Spyro community now recognized him as Spyro Dawn. In early December of 2019, Spora would begin to practice Spyro into Ripto himself. He was very skeptical of the trick's viability, initially believing it was more of a thing people would grind once for the achievement and then never touch again. After witnessing how far Spyro Dawn had come with the trick, he had changed his mind. Before December, Spora's personal best was a solid 927, which he had gotten using Spyro into theatre within Dragon Shores. After nearly a month of grinding Spyro into Ripto and being coached by Spyro Dawn, Spora was able to set several new personal bests, the fastest of which was an 8:53 on December 31st.
What the actual fucking shit? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What did I just do? What have I done, dude?
On January 1st, 2020, Spora demolished the world record with an absolutely insane time of 7:54, being the first person to break the 8-minute barrier. What was even more incredible was how he did it, by cutting nearly a minute off of his personal best. This run really did seem to have it all. A first try ground to portal and climb skip, an insanely fast gulp skip, a 5-cycle gulp, a first try penguin proxy, a first try over the wall in Dragon Shores, Spyro into Ripto, and nailing all the early hits on Ripto. Any trick that could result in more than a couple of seconds lost had been expunged from the world record run. A little over a month after Spora's 7:54, Moxy would briefly return to any percent and set a new personal best of 8:04. And then, Spyro 2 any % went stale. For the rest of 2020, there wasn't anyone that even came close to touching the world record. What had Spora done? Had he killed the category once and for all? No, but he might have with this run. How had Spora managed to come back from a 2.5 second deficit into Ripto to come out 4 seconds ahead? I described the Ripto fight in the 754 as having all of the early hits, and he didn't mess up any of the execution in that fight. Well, comically, Spora had accidentally paused the game while trying to get through the text box quickly at the start of the fight, but this was only about 2 seconds worth of the time loss. Where had the other 5 seconds come from? Well, we need to talk about Phase 3 Ripto in a little more detail. While Ripto's movement patterns in Phase 3 are not based on RNG, he doesn't follow the same path every time. What determines his travel location for a majority of the phase is Spyro's position at the time the game tells Ripto it's time to move. Given it's impossible to be stationary during Phase 3 because you are permanently flying, there is a sort of optimal route you want to take and hit Ripto at the correct times so you can get all 8 hits as fast as possible. In 2016, Touval executed a path through Phase 3 which allowed him to essentially get 2 early hits at the end of the fight, saving about 5 seconds on the typical route. What was crazy about this was that Touval had actually hit Ripto with a charge midway through the phase, which I didn't even know was a possible way to damage him before being shown this video. And perhaps even crazier was that Touval had intended for that to happen. While Touval's Phase 3 route was planned, it was tricky to pull off, as everything had to be timed out specifically to have Ripto and Spyro positioned correctly. Moxy had created a simpler version of this route, which also managed to get the 2 early hits, and that's what Spora had used to save so much time at the end of the run. To tell you the truth, Spora's 754 wasn't totally perfect. If he had better luck, he wouldn't have had to spend time repositioning barrels on Gulp, and his movement in certain sections could have been tighter to save half a second here or there. And in this new time of 749, he was actually behind going into Ripto, and saved the run by going for the fastest Ripto strategy he could do. Evidently, the time could still go lower. While any % had no new real competition for Spora during the entirety of 2020, the longer, less optimized categories were still getting some action at the top level. In March of 2021, the competition for the 14 Talisman World Record had come to an end between 2 speedrunners, Drashed and Walkers. Walkers was undoubtedly a veteran runner of Spyro 2, having played the game since way back in 2013, when Gulp skip was first discovered. However, he had focused on the longer categories, paying little attention to any % because of Waterfall Proxy. After realizing how consistent a person could get at Sproda into Ripto, he grinded out the practice and was able to get the edge over Drashed, and Walkers finished his 14 Talisman grind with a time of 23 minutes and 27 seconds. The very next day, Walkers would enter a call with Drashed, and for the first time, he would put some focus into any %, with the goal being to get a sub 8-minute run. During these attempts, Walkers would pay no attention to his personal best splits, and was comparing against his sum of best. On one fateful attempt, Walkers managed to get a frog proxy that was only barely high enough to make it up onto the ledge, and soon after, he flamed too early, missing the button had to turn back and hit it, costing him valuable time. Coming up to Gulp skip, Walkers was 3 seconds behind the world record. His angle of approach into the trick was very aggressive, and with some luck, he managed to instantly clip downwards and the tables had turned, with Walkers taking a 4-second lead into Gulp. While this 4-second lead was nice, it was completely meaningless unless he also got good RNG on Gulp. Things were looking up after the first 2 double hits, and then it got even better with a triple hit on the next cycle, giving some insurance for bad RNG later on. The good RNG persisted and Walkers walked out of the fight with a 5.5 second lead. The run was officially on. Up next was Penguin Proxy, and it was here that Walker's lead would grow even bigger. Spora had an unfortunate bonk while trying to get out of bounds, whereas Walker's did not. The lead was now 8 seconds. In Dragon Shores, for the first time since Summer Forest, Walkers would lose some time back to Spora. Walker's didn't land on top of the wall and perform a long glide towards the permanent fireball. This doesn't seem like much, but the differential was 2 seconds, and his lead was cut down to 6. Walker's scaled the staircase and performed Sprode into Ripto with a comfortable lead. As long as there were no major mistakes, he would set a new world record. Welp. He had totally misjudged where Ripto would go after that third to last hit, but that 6-second lead had to count for something. The only question was it going to be enough to hold on? On March 22nd, 2021, in under 12 hours of attempts, Walkers had achieved his goal of a sub 8-minute run, and unbelievably had snatched a new world record, taking it down by a single second to 7:48 in a category he had paid little attention to in nearly 8 years. At the top of the leaderboard, there were now 2 runners, separated by a single second and way out in front of everyone else. Both Spora's 7:49 and Walker's 7:48 were incredible by their own rights, but each run had their highs and lows. If one could combine the strong points of both of these runs and remove the weaknesses, the result would surely be the ultimate speedrun of Spyro 2 any%. Walker's world record run had completely caught not only Spora, but everyone else off guard. No one could have expected that the next sub 8-minute run would completely skip the 750s. Spora's motivation to play any% had completely resurged after seeing Walker's run, as he could see that there were still improvements that could be made. Spora had his work cut out for him. He would have to accept that unless he got insanely lucky, he was going to lose time to some sections of Walker's run, particularly Gulp skip. Typically, runners would line Spyro up nearly parallel to the wall and shuffle into it until his shadow drops to the floor below. Then, the next part of the trick can be engaged by turning the camera, which takes a couple of seconds, and then some more careful shuffling to get Spyro himself to drop to the floor. Walkers had gotten Spyro to drop to the floor in step 1 of the trick, which was totally out of his control, but extremely lucky. Even with this expected time loss, there were enough expected time gains that could be made in other areas. Due to how mentally draining this category was for him, he also had to plan a strategy to manage his grind to take the world record back. He would play for 4 hours per day, every day, for 1 week, and then rest for a week so he could recover from fatigue and prevent burnout. I wish I could say that Spora didn't really need this plan, as he got the world record back within a few days, but I can't. All he needed was to improve his personal best by 2 seconds, and yet, as weeks turned into months, that small improvement eluded him. But Spora wasn't going for just a 2-second improvement, and he knew exactly how good his run needed to be. And just to prove that point, he no longer needed to play with splits. On June 27th, 2021, Spora would finally get the run he wanted. Spora would go on to execute a perfect Ripto in this run and set a new world record. His small audience on Twitch just sat stunned at what they had just witnessed, and when Dan asked what he had just run into, Spora could only reply with, a dead category. So what was his final time? 7:36. It was quite incredible how good of a time this was, considering what I'm about to show you now. Spora had a bonk in Summer Forest, and he also messed up Climb Skip in Autumn Plains. Those were his only 2 mistakes, totaling for about 5 seconds. As most expected, he lost some time to Walker's Gulp skip, but it's not as much as you might think. Spora was using a different technique, which didn't require him to rotate the camera, which means he could perform step 1 and step 2 with little delay in between. It ended up being only a little over a second slower compared with Walker's instant clip. Spora's Gulp fight was near perfect, as he got extremely good RNG. Obviously, he had gotten the correct weapons to score 5 double hits, but their positions relative to Gulp and Spyro were also top tier. A sub 1 minute 40 Gulp split is considered to be amazing. If Spora was running with splits, his Gulp split would have been an insane 137. The Penguin Proxy he got in Winter Tundra couldn't have been better either. He got good enough vertical velocity to take a shorter path to Dragon Shores, which saved another couple of seconds. And he saved another 5 seconds over walkers with a perfectly executed Ripto, with the double early hit at the end of the fight. With the exception of the 2 mistakes in Summer Forest and Autumn Plains, every other aspect of Spora's 736 is at least A tier, if not S tier or higher. The Gulp fight made those 2 homeworld mistakes completely negligible. Any percent was now at a point where even if someone could nail every trick 100% of the time, they would still have to grind for weeks or months in hopes of cutting the time lower. There was one advantage that someone could use to save more time, and that was to play on PlayStation TV or PlayStation Portable. These pieces of hardware actually had faster load times compared to the PlayStation 2, about 8 seconds in total. Despite this, top runners would still choose to play on the PlayStation 2 because both the PS TV and PSP have input lag, which is both uncomfortable and would slow down precise execution. This time, Spora's run really did feel unbeatable. Even though there was essentially a free 5 seconds to gain, every other part of the run was basically perfect. Imagine how demoralizing it would feel to play a perfect early game on every single run, have the Gulp skip of your life, and then get a solid 5 cycle Gulp, only to realize you've come out on the other side a second or 2 behind, and there is simply no more time to save anywhere else. Even if you were ahead, you would have to get a lucky enough Penguin Proxy to match the line Spora took, match the perfect Dragon Shores, and then nail Sproda into Ripto, where even the best of the best runners hover at around 50% consistency. And that's why, in terms of both luck and execution, Spora's 736 is the cleanest world record run to this day. But cleanest run does not mean fastest run, and there is still one more world record to talk about. One boring night in January 2021, Bluntbows decided he would try out speedrunning and picked Spyro 2 as his first game, as he was already familiar with a few tricks from some old YouTube oddities. After running 14 Talisman for 3 months, he had decided it was worth learning Sproda into Ripto, and he would use it on dead runs to build his confidence. In June, Blunt decided he would switch to any percent, as he was already using the most technically demanding trick in the run. Just like every other top runner, it was a rough experience to learn, but with Sprodadorn's guidance, Bluntbows was able to redefine what it meant to be consistent at Sproda into Ripto. As a rough guideline, top runners recommend you should be able to get Sproda into Ripto around once every 3 tries before using it in runs. Walkers estimates his peak consistency was at around 50%, and Sprodadorn, the original person who grinded this trick for hundreds of hours over several months, managed to top out at around 70%. Well, Bluntbows was able to take his consistency to an absurd 99%, or perhaps even higher. Within a week of his first any percent run, he had set a personal best of 852, and a month later lowered it again to 829. Oh. Yeah, Blunt is still playing on emulator at this point, losing a huge amount of time to loads. Upon getting his PS2, he was able to get his first sub 8 minute run of 7:57 on November 21st. After capturing the 100% world record in mid-January of 2022, Blunt decided he would now focus on trying to take the any percent record. Being nearly 100% consistent at Sproda into Ripto was helpful, but it wasn't going to help him save time in that section of the run. Even with those 5 seconds of mistakes made by Spora, it was overwhelmingly likely that Blunt would lose far more than that on Gulp Skip, the Gulp Fight, and Penguin Proxy. If he wanted a realistic chance at the world record, he was going to need something else. You ever feel that sense of irony when something incredibly lucky happens to you, followed by something extremely unlucky? Well, that's what happened to Spora. Mere minutes after his 736, with everyone congratulating him, Drashed hit Spora with a ping, and a video followed by some apologies. In this video, Drashed had shown that it was viable for a human to use 2 frogs at the same time to get a proxy high enough onto the castle. This was an alternative to climb skip and allowed the player to get into position for gulp skip much faster. This trick had been known for a while, and was also first shown by Drashed in a task he had made in January of 2020. Nitrovsky and Silver then utilised it, where they did a crazy version of the same double frog proxy to get a bunch of horizontal momentum to make it onto the island in Autumn Plains. Double frog proxy was by no means free. You needed to get into the initial position and line spar up with the 2 frogs rather quickly so they don't start hopping and moving around. That's the easy part. From there, charge into both frogs one after the other. As you hit the second frog, the first frog will begin descending, and you then release charge to initiate the proxy. If done correctly, you'll proxy off the second frog, which will push you up into the first frog, which will push you even higher. If you aren't precise with your initial positioning and angle, as well as your timing for when you release charge, you will not be able to get enough vertical momentum to make it onto the castle. So, how much time did the double frog proxy save? Well, it could depend on how much vertical and horizontal momentum you got, which all depended on how well you executed each part of the trick. A decent double frog proxy could save about 5 seconds, which is a huge amount of time. However, in a similar way to Waterfall proxy, double frog proxy can be pretty inconsistent. There would be days where Blunt simply could not get the trick to work. But in his back pocket, there was still another time save he could use. In June of 2017, Drashed had found another way to get to the fireball power-up much faster in Dragon Shores. After landing on top of the wall, you can simply pass through the top of the pillar since it has no collision and then glide to the power-up. Although this seems rather straightforward, it's deceptively precise. If you glide too high up, you'll end up back on top of the wall or collide with the top of the wall's plane and fall to your death. If you glide too low, you won't have enough height when you get beneath the power-up. If performed quickly, this new method could save about 6 seconds over the old route. Nitrovsky was the first to grind this trick, and after a considerable amount of practice, he was able to get it consistently enough where he believed it could be used in runs at the top level. Blunt was then able to find some useful visual cues that catered to his playstyle. Given that both double frog proxy and the new faster fireball strategies were tough, Blunt would only use one of them per run. Oh, did I say Blunt was only using 2 new strategies? Well, he was actually going for something else as well. In May of 2019, Drashed had also found another small optimization in the first level, Glimmer. As you come inbounds into the final room, you can initiate a proxy whilst inside of the wall to get extra forward momentum. If you come in at the correct angle and perform a frame-perfect jump exactly when you activate the first text box, you can land on this ledge, which is outside of the talking radius for the NPC. Once you receive the talisman, you won't have to talk to the NPC again, and this saves about 2 seconds. Both Spora and Walkers had gone for it in their runs, but none of them were able to successfully pull it off in their world records. On January 18th, 2022, Bluntbows was able to pull off the Glimmer text box skip, and later in Autumn Plains, he nailed the double frog proxy and sketchily made it to Gulp with a solid Gulp skip. He took care of Gulp swiftly in 5 cycles, and after Penguin proxy and getting into Dragon Shores, Blunt went for the standard route. Well, sort of standard to get to the fireball power-up. He executed Sproda into Ripto perfectly and took out Ripto in a near perfect fight. The final time of Blunt's run was 7:40. A new personal best, but still 4 seconds behind the world record. Even with Bluntbows hitting 2 of the 3 new strategies in the run, this run was still not enough to crack Spora's 7:36. Blunt's run was near perfectly executed as well, with the only glaring mistake being this bonk in Autumn Plains. The couple of missed early shots on Ripto was also a bit unlucky, but even if both of these things had gone right, at best, it would have likely been a tied world record. Bluntbows would grind any percent relentlessly, and now he was going to use both double frog proxy and faster fireball in all of his runs. His daily schedule had basically been reduced to waking up, speedrunning, and then falling asleep to try again tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks, he would have many close calls, with runs coming extremely close and others with excellent all-round execution but poor RNG on Gulp. Eventually, all of Blunt's efforts would pay off. On February 7th, 2022, he would put together a run from start to finish and set a new world record. After a long, tiresome stream, at nearly 5:30 in the morning, Blunt had set a new world record of 7:32, and as of the publishment of this video, that's where the world record stands today. So, where can Spyro 2 any% go from here? Well, let's start with Blunt's world record. It was very solid all round, hitting every single known time-saving strategy, except for Glimmer text box skip. He missed the button twice when trying to set up for crush skip, and his penguin proxy wasn't the greatest, but he did well to recover with what he got. The Gulp fight was excellent, but it was still nearly 5 seconds slower than Spora's insane fight. If you could weed out all of the weak points in both Spora's and Blunt's PBs, the time would be in the low 720s. Now, let's talk about what's possible. As you've seen, it is possible to get a triple hit on Gulp. If you can score 2 double hits and then 2 triple hits, Gulp can be beaten in 4 drop cycles. This feat is extremely rare, but has been performed by several runners. It gets tricky to score a triple hit quickly due to the awkward weapon placements, but if one is lucky enough, you could shave off another 10 seconds on the fight. In 2014, Laponye and Crash worked together on a tool-assisted speedrun for any%. Unfortunately, it doesn't feature any of the newer tricks and methods that have since been found, such as Glimmer text box skip and double frog proxy. But it does have crazy stuff, like this frog proxy boost into another frog proxy, this frog proxy to get into Crush, and this penguin proxy to get into Ripto. There is also something else very interesting in this TAS. Remember how back in 2012, Saboom found the out of bounds in Dragon Shores to get Fireball early, and the detour to Dragon Shores became the standard route? Well, in the TAS, there is no detour to Dragon Shores. As soon as you get into Winter Tundra, you head straight into Ripto. In May of 2020, Tyzera spliced together some best segments from various runners' endgames, with the TAS playing the part of the Fireball-less Ripto fight to see a direct comparison. Obviously, the route with the TAS ending goes straight into Ripto and takes a huge lead, as the Fireball route must detour for Dragon Shores. It is worth noting that the Fireball route also does not include the faster Fireball strat from Bluntbows' world record, so we can subtract another 6 seconds from the comparison. In the Fireball-less route, we can see what having ridiculous luck and execution does to the fight. Hunter is literally dropping the weapons directly onto Spyro's head. As we come to the end of the fight, the Fireball route has made a huge comeback, but falls short by about 13 seconds. Factoring in the 6 seconds for faster Fireball, the Fireball-less route comes out about 7 seconds faster. Unfortunately, the sheer unfeasibility of getting luck this good is what prevents this route from ever being used in real runs, unless some sort of RNG manipulation is found. Well, I finally got there. I want to thank my brother for giving me feedback every week on the progress I had made. I want to thank Summoning Salt for graciously giving me the go-ahead on this project and giving me tips on how to not lose 40 minutes worth of edited footage. I want to thank the entire Spyro 2 community for answering the hundreds of questions I asked. I want to thank Stuart Copeland for creating the awesome soundtrack for the original Spyro trilogy. And I want to thank you for watching this video.